Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 9. My name is Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of Project Voice, General Partner of Project Voice Capital Partners. Glad to have you here. Before we get started with the show, I want to take a moment to share with you information about The Sound of the Future, which is Tobias Dengel's new book from WillowTree. I have done a separate video already reviewing the book. I'll make sure that that's linked in the notes of the podcast and in the notes of the YouTube video. But I want to read this to you. WillowTree President and best-selling author Tobias Dengel explores, in practical terms, how to prepare customer experiences for a voice-first future. The Sound of the Future connects the dots about this emerging paradigm to vividly illustrate how business leaders can stay ahead of the game rather than scrambling to catch up as voice technology gradually reveals its power. Get your copy today. I already have a copy of it. It's a phenomenal book. I've already said that like a gazillion times. If you don't buy the book, like, I don't know really what's wrong with you. It's a perfect Christmas gift as well for people who are working with voice AI, conversational AI, thinking about that in your personal life or in the enterprise as well. So with that, we'll get to our introductions. And Cecilia, I'm going to start with you. Take a moment, tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
Hello, I'm Cecilia Edwards. I'm a partner with Wavestone, which is a global management consulting firm that helps some of the largest enterprises in the world on their most complex transformations. I have a heavy strategy background and have been doing a lot of work in digital transformations, really helping companies think through when you implement a new digital technology or you're thinking about digital, how do you make sure that you're getting the business results that you intended from it? And as part of that, given all of the hype around generative AI that's taken place since ChatGPT's launch, I am leading some of the efforts in driving that thought leadership here in the United States.
Excellent. It's great to have you here, Cecilia. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Paul. And Paul, you'll have to pronounce your last name for me. I should have asked. Someone more responsible would have asked before the show started. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you do. Tell us who you're with.
Sure. Thanks, Bradley. My name is Paul Ghesquiere. I'm the managing director of Highland St. Charles. We're based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And our big focus is on sales and service readiness in org design in highly regulated industries. We work extensively with companies that have multiple go-to-market models across human capital delivery, contact center, call center, as well as digital. And we look for opportunities to extract increases in top line, gain efficiencies through cost and productivity optimization, and to help digital transformations and transformations generally become more successful. All transformation today is digital transformation. But we do know that 84% of digital transformations tend not to live up to their expectations. And so we work extensively with companies to help them to overcome the obstacles that prevent them from being able to realize the full value of their transformation initiative. Our projects tend to work with Fortune 500 companies and typically go months to years in duration. And then we've recently started down the path of fractional chief executive or fractional COO type of work, and focused on product and customer experience. We work extensively there with increasingly with companies, that are $1 to $20 million of revenue, and work through their transformation challenges.
Excellent. Well, if 84% don't live up to expectations, just lower expectations.
Unfortunately, that's it sounds like it could be just some trivial changes, but in reality, it's not usually a technical challenge. In most cases, it's a people challenge, and it's overcoming those whether it's been oversold and underdelivered, or it's been something that has been scoped incorrectly, or perhaps it's been the org design hasn't lived up to its full potential. Lots of different influences on what can make that successful or make that increasing the probability of failure. So,
well, we appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Next up, we have Sergio Bruccoleri of Centific. Sergio, tell us who you are, tell us who you're with, tell us what you do.
Thank you, Bradley, and thanks for having me. I'm Sergio, and I'm the Vice President of Solutions and Tech here at Centific for our globalization practice. We have our office here, actually located out of Barcelona, where we mainly serve our AI data business. So I lead those AI data technology and innovation efforts. So basically, I ensure that data workflows and implementation is supporting AI in the right way from a process perspective by combining technology with those processes. And at Centific, we are a global and digital technology platform company. We design, build, and optimize digital platforms with core strengths in data, intelligence, and experience, as well as globalization, which as I was saying, I represent, and sometimes is underestimated in the AI challenge. We work with several Fortune 500 companies to essentially ensure they have the right process to deploy AI safely and globally at scale, which is something that I was saying, sometimes we just don't take into account. So rely on a lot of those concepts like human in the loop, reinforcement learning from human feedback, as well as now more recently even red teaming. So ensuring that AI, as it transitions towards generative AI, doesn't just hallucinate out of the spot. And we do that not only with the technology, but we do it with a great pool of talent that we have nurtured over the years in our own platform, OneForma, where people around the globe can just contribute in building data that is going to feed these models by building safer experiences for everyone.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's great to have you aboard, and thank you for being part of it with us, Sergio. So with that, we'll get to the news, and we've got two interesting stories. I wanted to give plenty of time for both of these, so I didn't have a third one in terms of this episode. I'm going to read this headline out loud. This is from Insider. A minor ChatGPT update is a warning to founders. Big tech can blow up your startup at any time. And this article goes on. I'm going to read the subhead of the piece. There's 3 bullet points. ChatGPT can now interact with PDFs and let you ask questions about them. Changes like these could cause startups that build, quote, wrappers for AI chatbots to be edged out. It's a bleak reminder that swift rule changes by big tech firms can wreak havoc on smaller players. I'm going to go through the same order that we did the introductions in. So Cecilia, I'm going to start with you and then go to Paul and Sergio. Interesting article, interesting development, interesting framing. Want to get your thoughts.
Bradley, I do think it's very interesting framing because I think that the premise is a little off. I don't necessarily know that big tech is the one that blew up those startups. It's no surprise to me that OpenAI now has PDF capability. They will do articles. You knew at some point they were going to have to browse the web. And so as a casual user of these things, I was thrilled that people would invest their time to build plugins for us that would allow us all of this capability that you knew OpenAI was going to put in there at some point. So as I think about the business case for these startups, just as Paul was commenting about digital transformations not failing because of the technology, agree 100%. I don't believe that the reason the startups failed was because big tech did something to them. I think as you start to look at what the business model was, anybody that has been very thoughtful about how business would evolve and where tech would head probably could have predicted that at some point that OpenAI would have that capability. And so as you look at kind of what the companies did, those who I think were going to be successful, and I think it's very interesting that in the article, they actually call out Jasper as, again, maybe Jasper may be failing because of OpenAI. I don't quite think it's failing because of OpenAI. One, I think Jasper got it right. It's the type of wrapper that you want to have in that it is not just adding some new functionality on top of an API, that because you would assume that OpenAI could do that. What Jasper focused on was, what is a use case that that users have? How do I make it easier for them to think through all the sequencing of prompting, and how to make it easier if you are a marketer, let's say, as in the case of Jasper, how do I make it easier so that you don't have to know the best practices? You don't have to know everything that's required to make sure that you get good marketing content. That's what Jasper brought to the table. Their problem may have been just that it wasn't a $1.5 billion idea. Right? It's probably a little less that OpenAI did something to them, in that you really just needed to understand the fundamentals of the business, because we can't forget fundamentals just because we're talking about technology.
Well, that's no fun. No, I agree with so much of what you said, and found it interesting sort of how you presented that. Paul, I'm going to ask you the same question. Your thoughts on this piece, interesting framing. Want to get how you look at this.
I'm gonna expand upon something that Cecilia was saying just a moment ago here. It comes down to things like fundamentals. So if we look at any type of a business, we start at the mission of that business. We start at their kind of strategic objective, and it really contains three components: vision, scope, and competitive advantage. And too often I see companies that will they'll focus extensively on that vision and that scope. Where will we play? Who will we work for? Who will we do that for? And comparatively little time on why will we win? And that comparatively little time that they're spending on why will we win means that they're focused more on, hey, we have this market identified, and we're going to do this. We're the, how many times did we see 10 years ago? We're the Uber of food delivery. We're the, we take Costco product sizes and we make it accessible through DoorDash. Is that really a robust business model? Is that something that has, true staying power? Is that something that would command a 1.5 billion or whatever valuation? I don't think so. It may be cash flow positive in the short term, or it may garner investor capital, but is that something that is going to be, robust and resilient? So if we don't spend the time on that competitive advantage piece, we may tend to look at how can we get to market as fast as we possibly can. We'll take all the shortcuts we need to, and we're going to just go out and buy tools. We're going to leverage existing APIs. We may not even patent our technology. And so that time delay or I should say that lack of kind of due diligence in defining what that market is and the market potential for it means that you could be out innovated very quickly. And I think that's something that this article certainly speaks to, is that, existing businesses, particularly those operating at scale, are constantly looking for adjacencies. They're looking for upsell and cross-sell opportunities. They're looking for additional opportunities to vertically or horizontally integrate within their existing markets. And so that tends to drive, this notion of, well, my company is being out innovated by the big fish. Very possible. And I think that's something that businesses need to spend more time thinking about. Really, how are they going to win in the markets in which they play?
Couldn't agree more. And Sergio, I'm going to come to you and let you comment on this, and I'll open the floor to everybody just to discuss it before we move on. Interesting piece. You've heard two great sets of comments from Cecilia and from Paul. Want to get your thoughts on this article as well. Share them with us.
Yeah, I think this is not the first time this has happened since the ChatGPT craze, right? It was at some point there were 30 or 40 apps in the App Store that were talk to the AI and just OpenAI wrappers all of a sudden. The reality is the real innovation on any of these is the fact that they're doing this faster than OpenAI, right, at the moment. So eventually OpenAI will always catch up. I think that where the real differentiator must be for these wrappers, and I do agree with Cecilia, I don't think this is going to necessarily kill just per AI. It's going to be on what is that they're doing better. Is it user experience? Is it perhaps they're using better prompt engineering, right? I think for sure some of these startups that are coming out of the success of OpenAI are underestimating as well where OpenAI is going with their models, right? This is a property with a wrapper you'll never have control of, right? Is the model going to become better over time? Is it going to become worse over time? Is it going to be fine-tuned for your specific use case, perhaps? And I think a lot of the intellectual property is going not too much to reside on who gets to a certain feature faster, but who does that feature better, the prompt engineering, as well as the data and the security constraints, right? This is something that with OpenAI, you don't necessarily have control over the 3 or 4 pillars, but even just user experience and how the model is prompt engineering could make actually a huge difference between what OpenAI is developing with, let's say, their PDF parser versus what Ghesquiere has done. So I would say some wrappers need to, the less inventive wrappers will need to expect that OpenAI will catch up with them. But that doesn't mean that there is a market for very innovative prompt engineers or user experience designers that have built really pleasant experience for us to enjoy using OpenAI's technology.
Isn't the word wrapper insulting? Like, isn't that an insulting way to discuss a company? It's like if I called the National Football League a wrapper for football, it's like maybe, but nobody would think of it that way. Like you could call anything a wrapper, if anything specific and targeted at niches or specialized or evolved or iterated in any particular which a way, you can call it a wrapper, of something else if you wanted to. It's part of how the media, I think, is really just doing a big disservice. And not just to call out this article specifically, this is a widespread problem. And it's not just limited to the term wrapper. There's a lot of different terms that are sort of floating out there. The whole discourse in many ways around how quickly AI has grown and taken over our collective, attention is broken. It reminds me a lot of the Alexa era. So much of what is going on now reminds me of the Alexa era, where you had this phenomenon rise up seemingly overnight and created an ecosystem. And you had all these sort of issues where you had a lot of companies and enterprising individual entrepreneurs and startups look to do things within the Alexa ecosystem, and Amazon would take one look at it and say, I'm going to start doing that now. And you had the same sort of articles about Amazon, crushing the little guy. What's different about this one, though, that I think is a little strange is the actions of, Cecilia, you pointed this out, the actions of OpenAI attributed to all of big tech. No. You know what I mean? Like that's I don't.
Yeah.
Why would one company's actions, be attributed to everybody else? So this article is it's a sign of the times in many ways, and y'all called it out really, really well. I just wanted to link it back specifically to the Alexa era of 5 to 6 years ago, because so much of what we're seeing is repeating itself, which is why, like on the venture capital side, when we talk to startups, one of the key pieces of advice is the more that you can dedicate yourself and have the discipline to apply your AI tools or technology or whatever it is you're doing to one specific niche, one specific industry vertical, whether it's hospitality or automotive or media or whatever, the better off you're going to be, because big tech has trouble chasing you down in those tight corridors, and they always have. I want to open the floor up to discussion on this. We've heard a lot of great comments. There's a lot of different ways maybe to take this. Before we move on, I want to just open the floor, and anything that y'all have to say or add, I want to give you a chance to do that.
So Bradley, I want to come back to your question of is the term rapper insulting? And before we put all the blame on these startups for poor fundamentals, I think we need to think through what the intention of those were. Like I said, I was excited to see all the plugins because I said, boy, what this is actually a good bridge, right? When you are in a rapidly developing, innovative cycle, we actually need people who are moving faster than the big guys. We need people doing the hackathons and dreaming up use cases and testing and innovating. But that does not mean that every single one of those ideas needs to be a business, right? They are helping us all. We all learned more from all of those plugins. We actually, I'm glad that there's a reader GPT that can summarize web pages. Oh my gosh, that was helpful. And then I'm glad that, that I could get one of those PDF things to pull the text out of my PDF, right? All of those things were helpful for us to really think through what might our use cases be? Where do we need to invest? What's really going to add value? What isn't? And you have to go through that phase with any technology before you decide that it's a full-blown business. And so, yes, we need to do that. And so some of those things I do believe very much are wrappers. I think the point that you made about the industry, and that was my point around Jasper, that feels more like a business, right? If they're struggling, it might be because it wasn't a $1.5 billion business, but that's the right idea. They picked a niche, they understood what the use case was, and then they created an experience leveraging this tool that made it easier for marketers to execute their jobs. Same thing there. I have a podcast as well, right? And I use the AI tools because, boy, they teach me what the best practices are in creating show notes, and they will create summaries for me and give me tips on how to create intros. It brings together, I don't have to be an expert at all of the best practices in podcasting because the tool has done it for me. I don't know if it's a $1.5 billion industry either. It's worth my $10 a month, right? To do that. And so I think it's really around understanding, are you just playing with the tools and helping with the innovation cycle? Or are you really building a business? And a lot of these wrappers are helping us move up the innovation curve, not necessarily really establishing themselves as businesses.
No, I completely agree. And Paul and Sergio, I want to give you a chance to opine as well before we move on to the next story. But I will add on top of that, Cecilia, that, not mentioned in this piece in any way is the fact that OpenAI, created, I forget what they might call it, an app store. They have like an app store where you can create plugins. It might, I don't know if they use the word store, but it's where you can create plugins for OpenAI and then monetize those.
Right.
And
Bradley, think about Copilot, right?
Yeah.
That's coming out now on an enterprise side. Microsoft invested in OpenAI and they're charging just as much per license, or it's actually a little bit more for an enterprise license as they do an Oath 365 license, for you to have the privilege of putting OpenAI capabilities inside of Office. It's clearly not a wrapper. They have a very specific use case, that things that people are doing, and they're implanting that technology into the business workflow, right? That's thoughtful in terms of a business that you can monetize, and people are willing to pay a lot of money for that, as opposed to just these little bits and pieces of technology here and there.
No, you're right. And the term rapper kind of has enough pejorative connotation to it to where its usefulness might be short-lived. Paul and Sergio, want to open the floor to y'all. Any last words on this piece before we move on?
Yeah, I think a lot about just the last sentence or the last two sentences really in the article here. The key takeaway is that without a moat to make them significantly different from competitors, startups risk being plundered. Investors need to start considering if they've placed big bets on the wrong horse. I think that's really telling about where innovation lives today. And Cecilia raises an excellent point. You're continuing to, you need those early stage innovators that take a risk, that try something new, but just because you won the hackathon or you had a great idea, on Friday over pizza doesn't mean that, you need to start issuing, your C Corp shares on Monday morning. So, there may be a time to take a pause on whether that's something that's resilient and robust. And I think this article highlights that type of challenge.
I like that. Yeah, that's great. And Sergio, I'll give you the last word on this piece if you got one. Any final thoughts?
I would say, going back to is rapper an offensive? Well, I say there are rappers and rappers at the end of the day, right? I think I like the example, Cecilia, you made about Microsoft Copilot, right? We have to look at what's in there as well, even if it is a wrapper, because it is. What is in there? What did Microsoft add as their value? They've embedded it in a user experience, but most importantly, they probably validated it with thousands and thousands of Word documents. So if OpenAI was to do the same in ChatGPT, would that be the same experience? Would it have the same validation and the same effort put into ensuring is repeatable and it's scalable as much as Microsoft did? Probably not, because it's not their core business, right? And I would say just another thing is, at the end, what we're seeing with ChatGPT and the plugins is not different from what we've seen in history with Apple and Google and their app stores, right? At the end of the day, there is that one idea that becomes a system feature because it's a really, really valuable idea. See the Siri team who was a project voice this year, right? A great idea which becomes a system features, and that's worth investing on. And then a lot of voice clones which just became voice assistants, which became just irrelevant because Siri became a system feature. So I think it's about user experience, and it's about sometimes those wrappers really have great ideas for core business, and that's where these companies ideally, maybe Jasper hasn't only invested in creating a PDF reader, but perhaps has done a lot of validation into the user experience, into how the technology performs, that still makes it a superior experience compared to what OpenAI has to offer. But is OpenAI a threat to the wrappers? It is for bad wrappers, I would say, but not for good ones.
Yeah, no, complete agreement. And I think that's a good place to leave that. Just good commentary all the way around. And I suspect that's not going to be the last time we've got an article like that on the show. I want to make sure we have enough time for this second piece. I'm going to read this headline. This is from voicebot.ai. New report, deepfake and voice clone awareness, sentiment, concern, and demographic data. So this is we've cited VoiceBot on the show many times, and this is a new report from them, sponsored by Pindrop, which is a AI security company, where they evaluated and studied a lot of different aspects of consumer sentiment around deep fake, synthetic media, etc. I'm going to go in the reverse order of what I did to begin with the intros and the first story. So Sergio, I'm going to start with you, then go to Paul, and then Cecilia, I'll give you the last word on it. Sergio, we're a year away from an election. For starters, there's a lot of different paranoia in the world over different lot of things going on, a lot of conflict in the world, a lot of problems. And here comes AI, right? Quicker than anybody is really comfortable with. What did you think of just the concept of this report that VoiceBot's put together? And what stood out the most to you in terms of either what they discovered or how they even thought to execute the analysis?
I think I really appreciated the report because, when I look at AI in general, let's forget about deepfakes and voice clones for a second. I think that there are certain demographics that are more receptive to that change or less concerned about the change than others, which is something that the report clearly outlines. And I think definitely the concern is there, especially, and even before it was voice clones and very detailed deepfakes, that was a concern, I think, even in the last elections, that something was moving in the wrong direction with some of the content that perhaps is generated in social media, right? So the way I really look at the report is it clearly outlines how definitely there is a concern on deepfake and voice clones, but at the same time, with every concern comes an opportunity, right? And it comes an opportunity for us as an industry, I would say, to deploy these mechanisms safely and control them, and also create countermeasures to detect deepfakes and voice clones. And I think that's something that it's coming. If we look at a few of the angles, the White House is already doing some good work with some of the major players in trying and deploying safe AI, which is remarkable. And I think other countries should follow sooner than later, because I think having that control, sadly, AI is a wild industry, is a wild market. There will be big players controlling it, but at the same time, open source and experts as well at the same time, not perhaps putting the same amount of effort in building it safely. So we need to focus our effort in building countermeasures to fight it, but we should embrace it at the same time, right? But we need to have clear laws and regulations. I mean, we've seen it as well with the strikes now. Now that the Hollywood industry is all panicking about how AI is going to change those jobs. It's going to change those jobs eventually anyway, as it's changing many more jobs, right? The considerations we have to do are from an ethical perspective, as well as we as players in this industry need in a way to come up with countermeasures to prevent that from happening, ethical AI standards, not only in training, but in deployment and experience that AI, as well as the end consumers needs to be educated even more than the pre-Gen AI era. It already needs a whole lot of education in the pre-Gen AI era, now even more into understanding what are the threats, what are the technology that is available to respond to those threats, and at the same time, embrace the technology, because eventually it will bring some efficiencies in, let's say, marketing areas or other areas in which that technology is really great, is great for making movies. Can I myself as a movie maker enhance my current pipelines to build better visuals, right? But does it replace the human expertise? It doesn't. If anything, they feed each other.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And no, you touched on a lot of interesting things there. And Paul, I want to come to you. Really the undertone of what Sergio was saying is, his response to this report and just everything going on is we need to get to work, from an industry point of view and also a personal point of view in many ways. I want to get your thoughts. Interesting report, wide-ranging report. What stood out to you?
A couple of things stood out to me, and I think foundationally it starts with the much to Sergio's point, there's certainly concerns, there's certainly opportunities. Underpinning some of the the report generally about deep faking and voice clones is this in our media ecosystem today, especially in the U.S. market, there is deep distrust, and there's an overwhelming amount of bias tied into nearly all sources of news. And that's something historically that hasn't been the case. And I think, perhaps, if we think about kind of long term, maybe that's something that we need to see a resurgence of. But in light of that, in lieu of that, I think there's certainly the concerns of, what we just saw with the Hollywood unions around content generation, around the screen actors, and what security protocols are in place associated with that. How easily can I replicate an actor or actress's voice, or in some way mimic what their delivery might be on screen, and can I use that to create harm? Can I empower bad actors in order to deliver something that is is not necessarily news, and where could those bad actors play? If we look at it more from an opportunity perspective, though, I think from a positive, if I'm a large client company and I'm in the I'm trying to best deploy my my brand ambassador. We've seen a lot of companies recently come out with new brand ambassadors, and I think I saw Infosys debuted Rafael Nadal, and so just as an example, we could get to market. We could accelerate our go-to-market delivery with the say Rafael Nadal, and do that in a way that that I can now touch many more languages around the world, and I can influence global populations much faster. Rafael Nadal may only be fluent in 3 or 4 or 5 languages. I don't know the exact number, but my point is we can leverage his likeness, and we can accelerate our journey in a marketing context to reach the totality of the global languages in markets where Infosys might play. So I think it presents some really interesting opportunities in that sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I like sort of taking it that direction. And Cecilia, I want to give you the last word on this piece before we wrap up. VoiceBot always does interesting work. You've heard the comments from Sergio and Paul. I want to get yours as well. What you think? What stood out?
So one you talked about, was rapper a bad term? Like deep fake, really? Like I think we need a new term for the positive side of it, because that just doesn't really connote anything good when you think about that. But I do think that there is a positive, but there's so much negative. When I look at that report, the people, the what 30 or 35% or whatever that figure was of people who aren't concerned, I think either don't understand or might be bad actors themselves, right? Everyone ought to be concerned about this because we haven't done the work that Sergio talked about and some of the things that Paul mentioned. We haven't done the work. And I think more than anything that I've seen in generative AI, this is one where we need to do it. We are disrupting and potentially stealing. If you think about all the values that we have as a society, things that we think of as right and wrong, the ability for the general public to use deep faking flies against our sense of right and wrong in many instances. I love the Rafael Nadal example. He would give permission is the difference, right? There are tools that say, hey, you know what? Do you want to create a synthetic version of your voice? And then I have to speak into the phone that says, yes, this is me. Please use my voice in this case. I'm giving it permission because it's controlled. I think we have to think about that. But the other thing that concerns me is the long-term play on this. If we think that we can replace models and replace actors by just using the deep fake piece, what's the next generation? If we think that we can create scripts just by taking things that have been done and plug it into, some generative AI model, it craps out pops out a script, and then we just get some deep fake set of actors and create that. Who wants to watch that? Where's the human part? Where's the creativity? What does that do to your long-term prospects? What incentive do you have for there to be the next generation of creatives, of actors, of thinkers? And I think that going back to the concept of AI is not intended to take the job of people. People who use AI well are intended to take the jobs of people who don't. It is intended to be a tool to make you more creative. It's intended to be a tool to accelerate and make you more efficient in the things that you do. I love the idea around the inclusiveness of being able to speak to people in their own language. And so you could do something once and have it reach everyone. All of those are very positive use cases that increase the creativity and increase the reach. And those use cases are very effective. But I struggle to understand why the general population needs access to tools that allow you basically to steal from other people, leverage their creativity for your own use.
Can I add one thing as well on that comment as well? If I'm reading this report, I'm in the voice authentication business. I think back to again, thinking about that first article that we were talking about being about threats to to an industry. And I think back at, favorite movie, Robert Redford was in a movie called Sneakers back in the day. And it was the Sidney Poitier, and they were talking about the technology of using your voice to authenticate. My voice is my passport, verify me. It was the kind of tagline. Well, if I'm in the voice authentication business today, I'm deeply concerned about what business do I have if I can take my voice, Bradley's, Cecilia's, or Sergio's, and I can now leverage large language models, ChatGPT, or other types of AI, and I can now replicate my voice. That is a direct threat to any company that is in that voice authentication space. And that's something that's become very popular in recent years in insurance and financial services companies that I've had consulting contracts with. That's something that is very problematic for those.
Well, that's why you make a good point, and that's why we're seeing, really what I would call an arms race in terms of watermarking. The Biden executive order that just came out this week spoke to the need for watermarking, which was already something going on. But there's this arms race between authentication and security companies in the AI and technology domain to watermark and provide authenticity, while nefarious forces are constantly trying to one-up them and spoof all that and fake all that and get one step ahead. And I don't see any of that going anywhere. In fact, speaking of the election next year, I mean, forget next year. Look at what's going on now. If you look, we've already mentioned on this show, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I included the story, which did not make very much mainstream media, about Trump going on. It wasn't Fox. It was one of those news organizations that it's like Newsmax. It wasn't Newsmax either. It was some other news organization that's on the far right. And when he went on to do an interview on that channel, he sounded completely fake. And I went and listened to it. I talked about this on the episode where we talked about this story. I went and watched that interview where he was sort of calling in, and it didn't sound like him at all. And people were saying this is fake, and it sounded fake. But then it just kind of went away and we stopped talking about it. It didn't even get that much coverage anyway. No one was even clear why he would fake it. He liked getting on the phone anyway and talking. And then if you search for Biden fake on like Twitter or other places, you'll go down real fun rabbit holes in terms of what people think is real and is fake about what that guy does. So, it all sets the stage for, you cue the circus music for what's coming our way in a year's time. It's going to be, it's certainly going to be scary to normal people trying to figure out what in the world is going on and trying to make decisions. But on that fun note, we will depart. Great commentary all the way around. Appreciate y'all. Sergio, Paul, Cecilia, thank you all for taking the time to share your perspective and your experience with not just me, but the audience as well.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, you're welcome.
For This Week in Voice, Season 9, Episode 9. Thank you for listening, or if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you for watching. Until next time.